Hi, welcome back to the Watchung Booksellers podcast, where we bring you conversations from our bookstore's vast community of book professionals who talk about what they do for the love of books. We are thrilled to have you with us to kick off Season 3. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kathryn, and I'm here with my co-producer Marnie. Hey, Marnie.
Hey, Kathryn.
And today we are talking about collaborative writing.
That's right. We're so lucky to launch Season 3 with two writers who've developed their careers right here in Montclair and have been a part of the Watchung Booksellers writing community for decades. Our guests, Christina Baker Kline and Burt, both have wonderful bodies of work, but now they're launching their first book together. Both of them now live in New York and were gracious enough to come back home to Montclair to talk about how they created their thriller, Please Don't Lie.
And after you hear their talk today, you are definitely going to want to join them on September 4th for the launch of their new book. We are having this event in partnership with the Montclair Literary Festival, and it will be held at the Montclair Public Library. So it is safe to say that Christina and Anne are truly celebrating Montclair's book-loving community, and we hope you all show up for it. Tickets are available now, and you can find out all about it on our website.
We can't wait. And that event just kicks off a very busy fall. We're launching Bobby Brown's memoir, hosting international best-selling author Thomas Schlesser at the Montclair Art Museum, and so much more. So please take a look at our events page and reserve your tickets.
Okay. First, Marnie, have you had a minute to read anything this summer?
I haven't been doing a ton of reading, been doing a little more relaxing this summer, but I just actually started reading The House on Via Gemito. It's by Domenico Starnone. It's an Italian book, and I'm only, few pages in, but so far it's pretty great. How about you? What are you reading?
And you're reading that in English.
Yeah, sorry. Don't want to front. Act like I can read in Italian.
We know you could do it.
I don't think so. This is in English. It's translated.
Very good. Very good. Well, I have been trying to branch out a little from my usual contemporary fiction. So over vacation, I read a mystery, which I never read mysteries. And it was The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. It was a lot of fun, and it actually might get me, reading that genre. And I've also been reading some nonfiction, too. Right now I'm reading Barbarian Days, A Surfing Life by William Finnegan. It won the Pulitzer Prize in 2016, and it was recommended to us from one of our guests, Thad Zielkowski, who is a surfer himself, and he was on the podcast back in season 1 with Warren Zanes. And even though I have tried and pretty much failed miserably at surfing, I'm really enjoying it, and it is a great summer read. But anyway, let's move on and introduce our guests and get on to the conversation.
Christina Baker Kline is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 8 novels, including The Exiles, Orphan Train, and A Piece of the World. She is the recipient of the New England Society Prize for Fiction, the Maine Literary Award, and a Barnes & Noble Discover Prize. Kline has also written and edited 5 nonfiction books. Please Don't Lie is her first thriller.
Anne Burt's debut novel, The Dig, was an American Booksellers Association Indie Next pick, the Strand Book Store's mystery selection for spring 2023, and the IndieBound.org Indie Next lists Thrills and Chills, reading group title for summer 2024. She is also a nonfiction writer and editor, and a past winner of the Meridian Literary Magazine's Editor's Prize in Fiction.
Enjoy the conversation, and we'll be back after to fill you in on what's coming up in the store.
Hi, Christina.
Hi, Anne.
Here we are in Watchung Booksellers, where it all began for you and me.
That's really amazing to think about. I love this bookstore so much, and this new children's, I know it's not brand new, but new to me because we left Montclair 6 years ago. But this bookstore is sort of my heart and soul of my entire writing career.
Agreed. It was so formative. And this is where we met. This is actually literally where we met, was Watchung Booksellers. Now, it was upstairs around the corner at the time, because this was 25 years ago.
That's right.
But let's talk a little bit about that, because the reason that we're here today talking about our book, Please Don't Lie, is because of Watchung Booksellers, right?
That's exactly right. So I had moved to town, I think before you had. We were in New York City with two little boys who were, I think, 3 and a year and a half. And it just got a little untenable to stay. And the way I think many New Yorkers feel at a certain point. And I came out to visit my college roommate who had moved here and was in love with the place. And by the end of our visit, I think she had a secret scheme. We had seen a house and owned the house 2 days later. So it was kind of a shock in a million ways. For one thing, I don't even think I'd ever set foot in the state of New Jersey. I don't think I'd touched grass in New Jersey in my entire life before we came that weekend. But anyway, long story short, we lived here right across from Edgemont Park, right across from the fountain. Love that house so much. And I think my second novel was coming out.
That's right.
And Margot at Watchung Books was hosting an event, and I guess there were some flyers.
Yeah. Well, no, it was old school. It was more about how you got information back in the day about anything. So here's where I come into the picture.
Yeah.
I moved from Brooklyn, and this was maybe weeks before your second novel came out. I got the Montclair Times on my doorstep, and I leafed through it to see what was going on in town. And I had moved to Montclair with hearsay that there were tons of writers around. And so I landed in my house and I said, how do I find them? Where do they go? Watchung Booksellers was a good idea. And then I saw the article about you in the Montclair Times. You were giving a reading. And I'm usually kind of reticent when it comes to new people. I'm very open once you know me, but I am not really a big like, hey, who are you?
Yeah.
But I made a big determination then. I was like, I'm going to introduce myself to author Christina Baker Kline. And I'm going to beg her to have coffee with me after her reading. So I went to your reading. I did just that. And you were so warm, generous, lovely, down to earth that I thought, this is going to be great. And you know what it was? Not only did we then have coffee, but I think the next day you called me up and said, do you want to go to the movies?
Our movie relationship we'll talk about at length because it definitely is part of what led us to here. I want to say a couple of quick things as an aside before we get back to the things we had in common and the reason I think that we had this immediate connection. Margot is such a center of Montclair, and I was just visiting an old dear writer friend, Benilde Little, and she was reminding me that she had walked into Watchung Books and when she moved to town and said to Margot, I'm a writer. I want to meet writers. Who can you connect me with? And she gave Benilde my name. And the next thing that happened is I showed up on her doorstep with a coffee. I mean, you know, Montclair is that kind of place. And we all trust Margot, of course, to know who might get along. Right. But when you came up to me, we had some underlying things in common. We both had gone to Yale.
Yep.
And you mentioned that, and we knew the literal terrain of that experience and the figurative terrain. And we were both faculty brats, which I think was another thing.
That's right. Our parents were professors.
Both of our parents were professors. And I think also you had done an MFA, I had done an MFA. So we both were in the writing space. You're younger than I am. And so you were working on stories. I think you had just won a prize for a story and you were really excited about it. As it turned out, another crazy thing is that we were equally pregnant.
We were equally pregnant. Okay, that's a great term. We should start some kind of thing with like being equally pregnant.
Our children,
that's right.
My third, your first, were born 3 weeks apart.
3 weeks apart.
So we kind of had this, and we lived one block apart.
Yes.
Which we didn't know until all of this,
all kinds of coincidences.
So we lived a block apart. So we were always taking walks together. And after the children were born, they were like constant sort of pals.
They were.
So we had this sort of amazing both mother relationship and writer relationship. And I think one of the things that developed was that we both loved popular culture, but we loved it in a really deep dive analytical way.
That's right.
That nobody around us quite shared. I think we would go to movies and it would be a conversation, the sort of meta conversation about what was happening in the movie, but also sort of how it was done and how they got away with things and where the plot points were. And we were always looking at things that way. And also, I think interested in both high and low culture. We were in a reading group together. We still are. We're in a group of writers who still to this day meet after 20 years. We're also in a book club together. So we've shared a real history of talking and thinking about literature and books and plot and how things get onto a page for all of these years.
That's right. And for the past 25 years, over the course of that time, we've amassed a collective body of work that we've looked at in this analytical way together, as you say, high, low, in between. So when it came time to get to the point of writing a novel together, we had a shared frame of reference for a lot of stuff. We had really come to a point of understanding, like, what were we curious about as a team? What is it that we both were so obsessed about in popular culture, and especially women's lives in popular culture?
That's right.
That wouldn't let us go. And we both have these separate careers as writers, as, all kinds of professional obligations. You've obviously written many books with, incredible acclaim. There's this other piece of you that I think is fascinating, that I think people would be very interested to hear about, that has lent itself to psychological thrillers and to our team that you and I have always had in common. That's a very different line of investigation, I think. Don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I have always wanted to do a lot of different things. From the beginning, I have 5 nonfiction books and now, I guess, 9 novels. But I've always wanted to collaborate. I love that. I did a book with my mother, a nonfiction book on feminism. And then you and I quite early started talking about collaboration.
That's right.
I did a collection called Child of Mine, and I just loved working with other writers. But then you and I came up with this idea together for a book called About Face that was what do women see when they look in the mirror?
Yep.
That actually was the very germ, I think, of so much that we do now, thinking about women's place in the world, how we view ourselves, our roles as mothers, as partners, as professionals, as creatives. And that book crystallized a lot of that. And I think a really important thing that happened while you and I were sort of inching forward with this book, we were figuring out how both of us work as editors together. And that was a huge thing to discover. We had edited each other's work already to a certain extent, but working with other authors and really approaching words on a page, seeing what we agreed about, which was probably like 99%, but then also what we had to learn from each other, which is a very large 1%. I guess what I'm trying to say is your sensibility feels very aligned with mine, but you were also surprising me. And that was a really exciting thing, that you would find bits to talk about in people's work that taught me something too.
That's right. And you as well. And I had just edited my first anthology 2 years before that, My Father Married Your Mother. So I was working actively both as an essay writer and an editor. That's where I had turned the majority of my attention from fiction during that time to nonfiction. That was the lane I was working in at the moment. I didn't come back around to fiction, and especially not to long-form fiction, until my kids went to college, until I was no longer working a full-time job, because I did that in communications for many, many years. But all the touch points along the way of our work together led to the point where we are now of publishing Please Don't Lie.
That's right. That's true. So we could talk about how this collaboration began. We had edited, as we said, but writing a work of fiction is very different.
Very different.
So I had an opportunity, the writer Michael Chabon and Eilette Waldman, they're married, but they're also both have robust careers. They had a production deal, maybe he did, with CBS Productions.
It was together. It was a joint production deal.
And she had a really successful series. He obviously has had successful series as well. And they asked me, along with another couple of writers, to work with a team to develop a pilot idea. And I immediately thought of you. I was under contract for a book, so I didn't want to do it alone, but also I knew it would just be more fun and more exciting to try to work on this together. So you and I had bandied around some ideas earlier anyway, and maybe you take over from here with the idea.
So you came to me and asked if I had any ideas for a TV series, and I immediately did. And we were off to the races brainstorming. And I think what we discovered in the process of coming up with what would then be kind of a Bible for a television series was how exciting it was to build a fictional world together. How much fun we were having really kind of populating a joint world between us that was imaginary, but absolutely filled with who felt like real people doing exactly what fictional characters do. And we had this really exciting experience along the way of feeling like what it would be like to be in a writer's room on a television show.
I know. We often joke that if we were 22 now and coming out of college, we would probably head to Hollywood and work in a writer's room just because we loved working with that team. And we were the writers, but we had all of these people who were kind of weighing in. It was a 3-month process for us, and it exercised a lot of muscles.
100%. So we got really far also along in the process and revised and worked and pitched our piece together. And it went all the way up to the head of dramatic production at CBS. And then, like so many TV series, do, they came back and said, well, if you could take it in a different direction, we want to keep going, but not this one. We want it to be a procedural. Maybe. Yeah. And then you and I at that point decided this is not going to work for the way our minds work, but it really we got the bug.
Yeah.
And the bug turned out to be about world building together.
That's right.
So then I think it was maybe just a year later or so that we got a call from Jane Green,
right,
who is a very, very extensively published writer, and at the time was running a podcast that was for fiction and original fiction. And she reached out to you and said, Do you have anything?
Well, it was the craziest thing. It was at the time when podcasts were huge. They actually were throwing around a lot of money. They threw a lot of money, and Jane was like, I can pay you a lot. I need an idea. I just need an idea. 5 pages, single-spaced.
Right.
And I called you and was like, let's do this. Well, first of all, I do want to say that The Dig, your novel, emerged out of what we had worked on. So like that, you took it and transformed it into this other thing. But the germ of our work, you took and went off and did this amazing book.
Well, isn't that the thing with writers and creatives? Like, nothing is really wasted time. Nothing at all.
That's actually a good lesson if anyone's listening who's kind of nascent or beginning, that, I think we could have looked at that 3-month experience and thought it came to nothing and it was a dead end, but it was not a dead end at all.
It was a huge beginning.
It led to all of this. And I think we had a blast. And sometimes you just have to take a chance on things like that and think about how they're going to, as I said, expand the scope of what you do. And stepping back, that was one other thing I wanted to say about that experience, which is we, as I said, exercised this new muscle of real genre writing in a way. We were plot was primary.
Sure, for television?
As it is in television.
100%.
And for both of us in our other work, that is not necessarily the case. Yeah. And suddenly we realized, all this stuff that both of us have taught creative writing for many years, we've taught literature. I think that the shocking realization was that we just had a blast together doing this muscular style of writing that was more overtly sort of cinematic, and also propulsive and shocking and had twists and turns.
That's right.
That were much more overt than they are in our other work.
I think another thing that you and I have in common that I love about working with you is we both love learning really new things.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm going in and I'm not going to let go of it until I've strangled it to the ground and I understand how to do it. So for us to wrestle with this genre of psychological thriller gave us both real meat.
Well, it was new. And to be completely honest, I wasn't someone who read a lot of psychological thrillers. I've come to be someone who does. And I really admire the ones that are done well. But we had been we love Body Heat, and there are all these movies and series we've loved over the years that have this sort of psychological edge. And for the two of us, I think it was just such a different way to express what we love to do, which is to write.
Yep.
That we wouldn't ever have done on our own. And in fact, my publisher was very leery of this whole idea. They were like, doesn't make sense. In a funny way, it wasn't until that very commercial writer, Colleen Hoover, came along and showed, she was like, I'm not going to pay attention to any of the rules. I'm going to write thrillers and I'm going to write romance, and she writes very, very commercial fiction, quite different from our style. But it gave both of us, I think you and me, some confidence to say, look, we don't have to be in this straitjacket of what you expect from us. We actually want to do this totally different thing. So my publisher was like, okay, but we feel that it dilutes your brand, whatever that means. And my agent, to his immense credit, our agent, Eric Simonoff, said, don't worry about it. I want you to do this. Do it. Go for it. And so we did. That's what we did. Going back to Jane Green, we wrote this up. We had this great idea. So we finished this 5 pages. She loved it. She was like, sign on the dotted line. Here's the contract, and I'll pay you right away. I sent it to Eric, just sort of pro forma, my agent, Eric Simonoff, and he called me and said, I think this is actually a really good idea, and I wonder if it should be a book. I know feels like a lot of money in the moment, but I think it could actually be quite successful. So Anne and I talked about this, and I don't think there was a second of hesitation.
The only hesitation was, how was this going to work with both of our other books? At that point, right. I think The Dig was about to come out. You, of course, were working deeply on your next novel, The Foursome, and we thought, can we make this work? But we did, and this is another lesson that I feel like I owe a lot to you for. And I think along with other things that creative writers can think about and hope to achieve is what you taught me and what I think we now do really well, which is more is more. Mm-hmm. It is exciting to continue to say yes, and it is exciting to say making it work is valuable and fun. It's not a burden, it's a joy, and let's see what happens. And we take it from there, and you have this incredible quality of being able to pour yourself so fully into whatever is in front of you. Your novels, which are very different, the novels that we're doing together, very different from what you've done before. It is an incredibly inspirational quality, and I've taken it on as my own, thanks to you. And we're good. We can just focus when we focus on this world that we've built for Please Don't Lie, and our next one, which is set in the same largely rural Adirondack town that we've invented for ourselves of Crystal River. And it's become a real world to us.
It has really become a world. I think it might be a psychological disorder, so I'm happy to hear you describe it as a superpower. Maybe it is a superpower. My ability to compartmentalize is quite impressive. I mean, when you and I are working, that's all I'm thinking about. And when I'm working on that book, I'm really able to divide my brain and just do that and then turn back to the other thing. But with that said, of course, none of us are superhuman. And I've had to let some things go. For example, I was teaching in this novel mentoring program at Stony Brook that Meg Wolitzer runs, and I loved that. I loved being with the other writers, and I loved mentoring people, but I just couldn't do it all. So I let that one go, and I let a couple of other things go, because the truth is, doing books is really thrilling, I think. And you and I are just at the beginning of this process. As you've said, we have another book under contract. We're going to have a draft by the end of this year, which is much faster than I work in my other work.
Well, 2 brains, right?
Right, 2 brains. And it's just a whole different process.
Yeah, it is. I couldn't do everything that I was doing before. I couldn't focus on novels. I had to put my entire fiction writing
Do you want to talk about that for a minute? Because I think it is interesting and inspiring how you boomeranged back to your great love, and all the time you were creative through all those years, but you also had this very big career.
So I started out coming out of an MFA program in my 20s, like a lot of people did. Christina, you mentioned this earlier. I wrote a bunch of short stories. I won a prize. I had a novel in progress. But life took its twists and turns. And after being really convinced that I was going to go this traditional literary fiction route, once I got into the middle of marriage and children and divorce and work and life, I I just had to pivot, as so many people do. I had to take on a full-time job that had a lot more consistency and dependability with salary. And I knew that that was the right thing to do. I wanted to do that. I turned my skills into a career in communications, in arts organizations and social justice organizations, but it was very consuming and very full-time, and between that and parenting, of course. But for everybody who has to do that, and there are a lot of us out there, I feel like my sort of inspirational lesson is that I knew always that there was this piece of me that was not going to let go of writing fiction. And that's because novels from childhood are just my place of passion, as they are, I know, for you, for so many of us. It's just never let go of me. And I just wanted to be part of this world, this conversation with writers and readers. And I knew I didn't want to just read. I knew I wanted to be in the conversation by writing.
So what was the pivot for you?
Well, life brought the pivots. Mm-hmm. Pivot number one was I was raising kids and then they went to college and suddenly I had a lot more time on my hands, right? Pivot two was I got let go from my full-time job. And while that was very terrifying, it gave me the opportunity to build my own business as a communications consultant, which also meant building my own schedule. So I was working full-time, but I didn't have to work on somebody else's clock. Yeah. And that gave me the opportunity to use periods of time during the day to really focus on getting a novel all the way from beginning to end. Now, I never stopped writing novels. I just never had the bandwidth to get those novels across the finish line until I was in my 50s and until I didn't have kids and until I could set my own schedule. So there you have it.
And it was kind of amazing that the two of us came together at a moment when both of us could come up with this idea and do it. So going back to Please Don't Lie, we wrote this proposal for this podcast, and we had such a blast doing it, and it was the germ of this book. Do you want to tell people what it's about?
Okay, so Please Don't Lie is set in the fictional Adirondack mountain town of Crystal River, and it follows a young woman, Haley Stone, who's hoping to rebuild her life after she's experienced a series of devastating losses. So she's newly married, and she moves with her husband to this remote mountain town where he grew up, and she is determined to leave her past behind. But the past follows her to the mountains. Secrets begin to surface, hers, her husband's, those of her new community, those of the friends that they're making. So she discovers that starting over isn't that simple. Our goal with Please Don't Lie is to actually unravel some of the devastating truths that we hide from others and ourselves, especially when everything is at stake, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We had a really good time with this book. Nobody is who they think they are. And one of the things, though, that was so important to us, I think, going into the psychological thriller space was looking at some of the cultural influences that really affect women especially and women's lives. And in Please Don't Lie, we look at a couple of those things. One of the things that we use in this thriller is the self-help movement, the self-help genre, right? We use the self-help genre in this book. Haley's reliance on self-help books is both very real and very important to her. You know, we understand that this genre matters to people. There's a lot to say, but there's potentially a dark side to it as well, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right. I think that what we're learning together as we're working now on another book and have a third sort of in the ether that we're planning, is that we're obsessed with how changes in culture affect women's lives and change the way people move through the world. Social media is huge. Our second novel is more focused on that, on looking at the influence of, for example, the trad wife movement, the way people use social media to influence and manipulate each other. Super rich territory. The whole self-help stuff was fascinating to dive into. Another element of our book, Please Don't Lie, is the sort of back to the land movement and people leaving cities during COVID when we were germinating all of this. everyone seemed to be moving upstate. So that was definitely pivotal for us in thinking about, like, what happens when you pick up your lives and move to somewhere where you know someone. How does the town become a character that you move to? And I think, as we developed this book, we realized that what we love is what I think they would call a slow burn psychological thriller. That genre is just super fun for us. So, there's a lot of character development, but I think it's quite propulsive in the beginning. But when you get to the last third of the book, things are happening so quickly. It was just a blast to sort of choreograph it.
It was. So a lot of people ask us about what it's like to collaborate on a novel and how do we find the voice of the book when each of us has such individual voices as writers in our own career.
Yeah. I think, well, I can start by saying that we have developed a voice over 25 years of collaborative experiencing of the world. I mean, you and I communicate nonstop in a text stream of sending each other articles and pulling out quotes and focusing on things that we know obsess both of us. And I think we have a shared sensibility and vocabulary. I mean, that very first day that we went to a movie, we had exactly the same response.
We did. It was
we
amazing.
were experiencing it on the same level in the same way. There's a kind of slight remove. We're analyzing, but we're also real fans of good writing and of great plot development. And so we were kind of doing both. I think that cultural commentary and critique is in our fiction that we're working on together. So, we came to the idea of creating a story with that sensibility. Our outline, the first one we wrote, was like 100 pages, maybe more, single-spaced. We had so much in it, even dialogue and everything. I think we sold the book with an outline in 60 pages that we wrote completely simpatico in this way. We just... And I think a really important aspect of collaborate, two things that I think are key. One, you have to have yes and. You will say something and I will be like, wait, how does that fit into this? And in my own mind, I say yes. Okay, yes. If I say yes, then what is the next step from that? And the second part of my point is tied to the yes and, which is that you have to really, really fully 100% respect the person that you're collaborating with. And if you have any doubt, don't do it.
Fair point.
Because I trust you so much that when you say something that I haven't thought of, and my first impulse might be, how does that even fit? Where does it go? I know that there's a lot of brain work going into it. So that influences me to just say yes. And so they're tied together. And then the third thing, I guess, I said there would be two, but there are three. The third thing is that I trust and believe that you are as invested and embedded as I am. And I think you trust and believe that I am. So there's never a question that one of us is slacking off.
Absolutely. We know that about each other, and we know that about each other's work. What I think is interesting to share with people, too, is that at this point, I think working on our second book, we've developed our process, our collaborative process together on the actual writing itself. And we can break it into thirds.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So the first third, as you mentioned, is together. We come up with the outline and we really dig into those characters and we really dig into the plot and we have a shared world between us. We know where we're going. And that is the most important beginning step in a collaboration.
And it's really a narrative. I don't think either of us work this way in our other stuff, which is that you kind of map it all out.
Right. We have to do that so we can have a shared understanding, because in the second third, we each go off and we write different parts. Now, we don't write separate chapters. We don't like working that way. We know a lot of collaborators trade off chapters. We don't do that. We both have our hands on literally everything. So the way that it's been working so far with our books is that I'll do the first pass at the draft, and I write a very rough draft with holes, deliberate holes. So
and lots of extra stuff so that we can play.
Yeah. It's a menu as well as a draft. And then I ping it over to you, and you're adding new stuff too, or shifting,
Yep.
et cetera. And then we come together and we go sentence by sentence, and we make sure that both of our minds, hands, brains, hearts are committed to what we have on the page together. So that's the second third. And then the third has been fantastically intense. We read that book out loud to each other across our kitchen tables in our various apartments in New York, maybe 3-4 times fully, working with the editors that we worked with at our publisher, working with each other. And that leads us to saying, yep, this is ours. This is our voice together. It works on the page. It's different from what we would do individually, but it is exactly what we together want it to be.
That's right. It's so fun to get the outline, but then get your draft. Like you and I were talking about this yesterday with the new book, which we'll talk about in 1 second. With the new book, I was reading this amazing material, and you've got all this background, and we've got all the stuff in the outline, and then you've added things, and I found what I think will be the beginning of the book, about 15 pages, 20 pages. So there's just a joy in that process for both of us.
I just also have to say, I love your brain. I like working with you. I like getting in there and knowing
mutual,
how you like
obviously.
to think.
Obviously, we wouldn't be doing this otherwise, but it is just so fun. And, given how hard it is to write a book by yourself, this is just like popcorn, where my husband says, for two people working on murder and death, you two laugh all the time when we're because the last part is sitting together.
Yeah.
We do it over Zoom if we have to, but we really like to carve out entire days together, 8-hour days where we're just really working.
Yeah. I also really appreciate sharing a dark sensibility that we both have that lends itself to the psychological thriller genre. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And it's fun, and it actually feels deeper than I thought it would.
Right, it does. I think partly because as we've gotten ambitious for ourselves in terms of sort of touching on, these are not throwaway in that we're really actually tackling beliefs we have about contemporary life that are deeply embedded in our stories and our characters.
That's right. But we think also we're making it really fun for the reader. It is fun,
I hope. I think it's really fun. One of the things that's fascinating about working on this new genre with a new publisher is that it works very differently at Thomas & Mercer, our publisher, than it does at HarperCollins. There's an acquiring editor, and then there's a developmental editor they work together as a team. And they specialize in mysteries, thrillers, suspense
Thomas
novels.
& Mercer is a mystery and suspense imprint.
That's right. And it is so wonderful to have access to these people who know everything about the genre. So we were super lucky when we turned in our pretty polished draft. We had the joy of working with someone who was so granularly involved, who just loved our story and also gave us so many fantastic ideas for how we could sharpen moments. For example, one of the things that neither of us do in our other work is that every chapter ends with a scorpion's tail, sort of something that slashes you forward. And so we learned how to do that with the genre. These chapters are short. They're propulsive. It's a sort of juggling process. When you write a thriller, here's what we discovered, among many other things. The people who read these kinds of books are very savvy, and they've read many of them oftentimes, and they know they're really wanting to kind of flay you. They're to discover, they want to know that they are right about their impulse at the beginning of the book. And so it's kind of a game to them. And if it's too easy to know what really happens at the beginning, it's no fun. So we've learned sort of how to make our story both psychologically grounded and for there to be surprise. What is that wonderful line that the best endings are surprising but feel inevitable?
Yes, that's right.
And that, I think, is something we've really taken to heart.
Yep. Something else that I'd love to add about this conversation is the world of psychological thriller writers that we've now dipped our toe into, and it is a fantastic community. The people that we have met who are writers in this world are some of the kindest, most generous, actually nicest people
They're
I've
very nice.
ever met. And we have conversations about this, like, why do writers who specialize in, grisly, horrible things happening to innocent people, why are we all so kind of nice and kind to each other and warm? And, I think we get it out on the page.
I think so too.
So that's really great. And the community that we've learned about, both readers and writers, it's wonderful. It's interesting. It's multifaceted. I love the lane that I learned in, that we both learned in, from MFA and literary fiction. And it's a beautiful world. It is equally beautiful to be discovering the passionate engagement in the thriller writers world. I felt like we've been really welcomed.
Yeah.
And we're learning a ton.
Well, and you went to Thriller Fest.
I did. So there's this amazing conference that happens every year in New York called Thriller Fest in June. I taught a craft class at Thriller Fest. I was on a panel. I attended lots of other events, met lots of readers and writers. There were about 1,000 people who attended, I think. And it was just a celebration of this art form and all the subgenres in this art form. The other thing that's great about thrillers is that it's an umbrella that encompasses so many different points of view. People from every different background I can imagine are finding a place where their voice matters and their voice can be heard, and readers who want their voice. It feels like there's just, it's rolling out like a huge red carpet of saying, let's have a conversation, writers and readers, of whichever slice within this genre speaks to you.
That's right. And just to be clear, I think what we're saying, what Anne is saying, is that this is quite different from literary fiction, actually. And yes, we swim in those waters and love that world and have lots of colleagues and friends, but there's a kind of welcoming generosity in this genre that is different.
Yeah. It takes all comers, right?
Takes all comers,
That's
right.
it.
I think a lot of literary writers are shy and, and we're all in our silos. But in the thriller world, there's so much collaboration, actually. We know a number of collaborative pairs, but also just people are always thinking of each other in all these different conferences and ways. And maybe they just don't take themselves quite so seriously.
Maybe. People that we've met are having a good time.
They're having a good time.
And I've got to say, there's brilliant writing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a couple of the writers that we really love in this genre.
I'm a huge fan of Ruth Ware. I would say read all of her work. She's British. She is young. She is psychologically astute. Her work is atmospheric. I think you and I have both taken away from her work. We've been inspired by the way she deals with setting, the milieu of her world. Her world building is incredible. And I was lucky enough to meet her last year at a writers' conference and hang out with her. And she's just a lovely person, but her work is so, so bright.
Yeah. It really is. It's fantastic. And I would say that Megan Abbott has been a North Star for me as a writer for many, many years. But now that we're in the psychological thriller space, even more so. Her entire body of work, she's so influenced by the noir genre.
Yeah.
And then she just takes that and she gets to the kind of heartbeat of women and girls' lives and the intensity between them. Her sentences are just to die for, and then her characters often die. But she's just such a great writer, an interesting writer, and we've had the opportunity to meet her now too. So smart, such a wonderful person. Her books are great. I recommend her entire body of work as well.
I think you and I were really influenced by Megan's own interest in pop culture and in women's lives. We saw in her writing a space that we felt was really where we wanted to dwell.
That's right. I think that's right. And speaking of spaces where we dwell, the fictional town of Crystal River, where our first two books take place, keeps getting more rich and deep and interesting the more we think about who else could live there and what else could happen there. I feel like we've built this really sustainable playground for ourselves that somehow we keep coming back to and keep diving in. And, I think it's going to be fun to see where we go with this.
Well, there was a question that our editor had, which is, do we want to call this the Crystal River series? But our books, you don't have to read one before the other. So we were leery of kind of turning it into that sort of idea. For the moment, they're all standalone, but it's fantastic that we can sort of plant these Easter eggs all over the place through our second book.
We take a lot of inspiration from Tana French and her Dublin Murder Squad novels, where a minor character in one novel becomes the protagonist in the next.
That's right.
That really appeals to us. That's what we're doing with our first novel, Please Don't Lie, and our second novel, which is going to come out a year or so, maybe a year and a half from now, a secondary character, and because we don't want to give away any spoilers, we're not going to say who, becomes one of the main characters in our second novel.
Yeah, which is just so much fun to write.
So Please Don't Lie, which comes out September 1st, is on its way. You can pre-order it now. But please make sure, if you're here, to come see us. We're doing an event here in Montclair that is co-sponsored by the Montclair Literary Festival and Watchung Booksellers. It's going to be on September 4th, which is a Thursday. I think details are going to be available on this website. Please come and see us. And we are very excited to be back in Montclair, where both of us lived for so long, talking about our book together.
Yay. Perfect.
Okay. Thanks, Christina. It was fun to talk with you.
Thanks, Anne. That was great.
Thank you, Christina and Anne, for your insights into writing together and for being such good friends to Watchung Booksellers. Listeners, don't forget to join them for their book launch with the Montclair Literary Festival on Thursday, September 4th at the Montclair Public Library. You can find a link to this event in our show notes and at watchungbooksellers.com.
We've got one more event before Labor Day. On Wednesday, August 27th, we are hosting Sharon Kurtzman for the release of her novel, The Lost Baker of Vienna. She'll be talking with Stacey Rubis, author of Oriana and a former guest of this show.
And if you'd like to join us for the New York Times 100 Best Books of the 21st Century, we'll be meeting on Monday, August 25th at 7 p.m. There's still time to register, and the book we'll be discussing is The Human Stain by Philip Roth. We've also got a slew of new book clubs, 9 in total, so please take a look at our website to read up and register for those.
You can get details and purchase tickets for all these events through our newsletter, show notes, or at watchungbooksellers.com.
The Watchung Booksellers podcast is produced by Kathryn Counsell and Marnie Jessup, and it's recorded at Watchung Booksellers in Montclair, New Jersey. The show is edited by Kathryn Counsell, and original music is composed and performed by Violet Mujica. Art and design and social media by Evelyn Moulton. Research and show notes by Caroline Shurtleff. Thank you to the staff at Watchung Booksellers and the Kids Room for all their hard work and love of books.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, please like, follow, and share it. You can follow us on social media at Watchung Booksellers. And if you have any questions or ideas, you can reach us at wbpodcast@watchungbooksellers.com.
We'll see you next time. Until then, for the love of books, keep reading.